Five Nights at Freddy's is a franchise that I have a very complicated relationship with. On one hand, it defined my preteens and was definitely the series that got me into overanalyzing my favorite things, but outside of that, this franchise hasn't really left that much of an impact on me despite it being one of the first franchises I really got into. I stopped paying as much attention after the fourth game, with my interest slowly fading until Sister Location's release, after which I left the series entirely until Security Breach's very unfortunate launch in 2021, which I didn't play for another year after that. Recently though, I tasked myself with the insane challenge of marathoning most of the series, starting at the first game and going up to the recently released Into the Pit, and it got me thinking, how well do these games hold up nowadays? One deranged 11-hour stream and a lot of late night writing later, and I think I'm finally ready to put my thoughts into words. FNaF 1 was released on August 8th, 2014 and was a very strong start to the franchise. It had a quite simple premise. You're a security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza who's tasked with watching over the animatronics overnight and making sure they don't approach your office. The gameplay loop is fairly simple too. You watch the animatronics through the cameras, and if they approach your office, you shut the door on them. However, you can't keep these doors closed all night, as you also have to manage your power consumption, which these things use for some unknown reason, because running out is almost a guaranteed game over. I think the gameplay is the worst part of the game, because these nights go on for 9 whole minutes, and for a majority of the game, there's nothing going on. Everything starts out so slow, and I find it hard to engage with the game in those early nights, with the game only really ramping up near the end of its runtime, which is a shame because I think it's really great from a conceptual standpoint. The mechanics are decently thought out and work really well, it's just far too slow to keep my interest on repeat playthroughs. I also find it weird the whole point of the game was the camera system, but it's one of the weaker implementations of it in the series. You can't just check the cameras whenever because you have very limited power and you'd want to conserve as much of it as possible, and if it wasn't for Foxy, you wouldn't even need the cameras. The ideal strategy for this game is flipping the monitor for half a second and checking the doors on repeat, which is about as fun to play as you're thinking. I understand that the slowness of this game might be why some people find it scary, but I'm just personally not a part of that group. It's hard for me to feel scared when I'm barely engaging with anything in the game, which is a really big shame because I think this game has one of the best atmospheres in the entire franchise. No future game comes close to the level of immersion that this game provides. There's just something about how the game looks and sounds that really draws me in sometimes. You're in this very claustrophobic office working at a pizza place that feels run down despite being open for business, and these animatronics that are weirdly alive for just being robots. Bonnie and Chica make human groaning sounds when they're in your office. Freddy has a laugh whenever he moves. And Foxy can be heard singing a song sometimes. Not to mention the robot talking Bonnie and Chica doing in the hallway corners. Add on to the fact that you only get very limited glimpses of this place, and it really does add a lot to the immersion. I just wish the pacing didn't hold it back as much for me personally. FNaF 2 was released only a short couple months later on November 10th and was the first game in the series I actually played. It's a very similar premise to the first game, but where it makes changes is in the gameplay. There's no more doors or managing a pair of AA batteries that the entire building runs on. Instead, you have 2 vents to either side of you, a hallway that you have to flash your light down, and a Freddy mask to defend yourself against any animatronics that may enter your office. I think this game has the worst implementation of the camera system because at some point you don't have time to just watch any camera that isn't the prize counter because of the music box. You can get away with it for the first couple of nights, and fun fact, you can beat night 1 while completely in the camera, but once every animatronic is active and at a higher difficulty, you just don't have time to watch the cameras. At least in the first game, you could check other cameras as long as Freddy wasn't in Cam 4B, and even then that wasn't super common until the end of the later nights. This game pretty much just forces you into Cam 11 as early as night 2, so the rest of the camera system just may as well not exist. The game is also very infamous for being extremely random, with 10-20 mode being mostly luck-based as far as I understand it. I don't have as much problem with this as some people, but I can understand why people have such an issue with it because it feels more fun in this game than later games. It feels bad to die to things out of your control, I understand that, but I'm saving this rant for a future game because it doesn't feel nearly as bad in this game. Something I also like about this game is the faster pace of the nights. It feels like you actually have to play the game for most of it. The atmosphere is one of the weaker in the series, even though it has the iconic ambience track. Nothing about it feels particularly scary to me, from the visuals of everything to the sound design being overall weaker. The office is very open, the newer animatronics look way too plasticky to really feel like they're actually alive, unlike the first game. Although I actually do like how the withered animatronics look, the general sound design just feels weaker this time around too, despite a lot of this game's sound being pretty iconic. I believe there's also just less sound in this game than the first as well, which could be why I feel this way. There's nothing like the human groaning noises or the song that Foxy sings. Hell, Freddy doesn't even do his laugh anymore. It's a shame that this atmosphere suffers as much, but it makes up for it by having an actual gameplay loop, unlike the first game where I feel the opposite. FNaF 3 was released another short couple of months later on March 3rd, 2015, and is the first game I have truly mixed feelings towards. It's the first time the general gameplay gets shaken up with there being only one true enemy and having 3 separate systems to manage. Contrary to the previous game, I think this game has the best implementation of the camera system. It feels like you're actually monitoring the threat using the camera system instead of it being a gimmick that just forces you to be active. You're supposed to be finding Springtrap and luring him to different cameras, and sometimes you have to scour the entire building just to find him. He's also very hard to spot, making you have to pay more attention to the cameras, which also adds to immersion, but I'll touch on that later. Phantom animatronics are a neat idea too, extra enemies that don't end your run but are enough of a detriment to make you want to avoid them. Another addition to the general gameplay loop is a maintenance panel that allows you to reboot your audio, video, and ventilation systems. These systems will degrade over time, and being jump scared by a phantom will create an error in one of the 3. Remember a little bit ago when I said there was a game that I had a problem with in regards to the RNG? It's this game. This clip right here perfectly summarizes my problems with this game.
Hello?
He's in a vent and I don't know which one it is, and I hope it's Cam 11, because if not, I'm dead. I don't know why it feels worse in this game, but it just does to me. It feels completely unfair compared to FNaF 2, where your run can end at any moment if one small thing goes wrong. It feels like there's no chance to fix the situation, and instead you just have to accept your fate. Not to mention how some animatronics feel impossible to react to on later nights, and you have a recipe for disaster. The night pacing is really good, and I like the general loop, but the random elements just bog it down for me. The atmosphere of this game is disliked by a lot of people, but I'm personally fond of it. Sure, it's still not very scary, but in terms of immersion, I actually think this game holds up very well. It really feels like you're in a horror attraction with a bunch of old systems that are breaking down all the time, and the gameplay adds on to it as well. I can get the complaint of it being too green, but I think it adds more than it takes away. The camera views are also rendered extremely well, with Springtrap being really hard to notice, like I mentioned earlier, making you lean into the screen more and focus on finding him, priming you to be jump scared. It's a cheap trick, but it is effective. This game was supposed to be the end of this series, with a definitive good end you could achieve by doing a bunch of minigames over the course of the game. These steps were pretty complicated at the time, but of course it's widely known what you have to do for it now. We know that this isn't the last game in the series though, but it's interesting that Scott intended on ending it with this game. FNaF 4 was released, get this, a couple months later, on July 23rd, and was the supposed final chapter of the series. This game is the most different from its predecessors because it not only forgoes the camera system the previous games used, but can also be beaten without any visuals at all, relying entirely on sound. This game returns to the first game's method of defense, where you have to use doors to protect yourself from the animatronics, with the twist of having no monitors, as mentioned before, and having to move to each door and listen for breathing. There's also the closet, where Foxy resides if he manages to enter your room, and the bed behind you will spawn mini Freddys that you have to flash with your light. The game also happens to be my least favorite because of this loop. The jump scares are intentionally loud and the breathing is so quiet it's hard to hear, which I understand is the point of the game, but doesn't mean I enjoy it. I do actually enjoy the tension that this game creates when you run up to your doors, but outside of that, I don't like a lot of this game. It just feels like it tries too hard to be scary at times, especially with the animatronic designs. While I am a fan of the designs of the Nightmare animatronics, I do feel their design tries too hard to be scary, especially once you combine them with the gameplay loop. I do think the house is fairly well designed visually, even if it's one of my least favorite locations in the series. It does a pretty good job of being immersive despite my problems with it. The sound design is really well done too, with there being distant noise like a dog barking or chimes going off. The footsteps being directional is insanely helpful too, since if I remember correctly, no other game had directional audio. This game also has a lot of content to play through after the 5th night, like extra bonus nights, challenges, and a minigame called Fun with Plush Trap. Fun with Plush Trap was a minigame that you'd be prompted with before every night and would allow you to skip 2 hours of the next night, with it being a standalone option in the extras menu. You could also make the nights harder by adding challenges like Blind Mode, which is pretty self-explanatory, and Insta-Foxy, which would make Foxy start out in the closet as soon as the night started. This is also where the cheats were located, with fast nights and allowing you to turn on a map in the corner that would tell you the location of all the animatronics. Finally, an all-nightmare mode will replace the animatronics with nightmares for the entire night, which is the hardest challenge in my opinion. I neglected to mention how this animatronic works earlier, but Fredbear, who's basically Nightmare, shows up on night 5 and onwards at 4 AM acting as a kind of boss battle. Their gameplay loop is largely the same, where you have to run to whatever side you hear them go to, flash the hole and shut the door on them. Occasionally they'll laugh, and sometimes this laugh can be fake, which you can determine by listening for footsteps after the laugh, but if the laugh is real, they will either teleport to the closet or bed, in which you'll deal with them by flashing your light on them. This was also the first game to get significant updates post-launch, with FNaF 4 Halloween Edition coming out on October later that year. This was a mostly visual update, with Bonnie and Chica gaining new Halloween-themed appearances, but not Freddy, for some strange reason. Foxy was replaced by Mangle, who even brought over her radio static sounds from the second game when she's in your closet. Fredbear remains unchanged, but Nightmare is replaced by Nightmarion, who plays the music box tune the entire time they're active. This makes the Halloween edition harder than the base game because there's constant audio that obfuscates the very quiet footsteps and breathing that you need to be able to hear. Even Plush Trap got replaced by Balloon Boy, and I believe Fun Time with Balloon Boy was even added to the normal game. It wasn't much, but it's still a really neat thing that this game got a significant post-launch update. This game was subtitled The Final Chapter, so presumably it was intended to be the last game in the series, but as we all know by now, Scott has a bad track record with making the final game in the series. This game's release also started my decline in interest in the series, with it dying off mostly throughout the next year. I figured the series was done since we had no word of a new game for a while after Halloween Edition's launch. This was also around the time I started getting interested in other franchises, so this one understandably took a backseat for a while. The next main game would change that. Until then, however, we got something very special to try and hold us over until then. FNaF World was released on January 21st, 2016 and was the first spin-off game released. It was initially met with harsh criticism upon release due to the trailer for the game showing off a 3D overworld but releasing with an 8-bit styled overworld on top of the game being completely unfinished, leading to the game being delisted and updated roughly a month later on February 8th. This game is a lot different from the previous ones, being an RPG instead of a click-and-point survival game. You're tasked with going through 6 different areas trying to find the cause of a distortion that is affecting this world. During your time exploring, you'll fall into the glitch world, with there being 3 layers to it that can safely be traversed. Throughout the game, you'll fight bosses and gain new characters in order to keep progressing until you fight the security system at the end of the game. You start off in Fazbear Hills, where you'll be greeted by Lolbit and Mendo, who act as shops, as well as Dee Dee, who hosts a fishing minigame. This fishing minigame is actually pretty worthwhile, since if you get the pearl at the bottom 5 times, you'll unlock it as a free bite that heals the party. You're pretty free to move around and do whatever you want, but obviously you'll need to grind up levels and obtain more characters before moving on. There's also a hidden path around here that takes you to a later area, but that's not really relevant right now. Eventually you'll move on to the glitch tree, where you can traverse to the second area in the game. Once you arrive in the second area, you'll press a button and unlock fast travel. Here's also where you find your first no-clip object, where running into it will clip you onto another plane of the world so you can unlock certain chips not otherwise obtainable. You also have two paths you can follow, one to the left to progress to the next biome and a cave to your right, giving the player some choice on their path, but obviously progressing to the next biome is how you won't progress the game. Once you arrive in the third biome, it's the typical snow setting. Once again, you'll run into Fredbear, who mentions the glitched object past the snowman, and once you defeat him again, you have another choice. You can go in the cave for a bite, or progress to the glitched object to progress the game. The fourth area is a lot more interesting, as there's a giant lake for you to traverse, and it's fairly big. To the south, there's a portal that takes you to a Lolbit shop that's actually located in the sixth area, and if you head up north, there's an extension of Choppy's Woods. In this area, there's a cave for you to progress to, and it's one of the bigger caves in the game. Sadly, it's an optional cave, like all the ones before it, but it's still pretty neat. Instead, you're expected to, stay with me, head into a glitched object, progress. The fifth area is a graveyard, and is sadly one of the smaller locations, meaning there's not much here for the player to do. However, this area makes a massive, groundbreaking change in the formula. There's a mandatory cave segment. Yeah, it may be the only way forward, but hey, every other cave has been optional up to this point. This cave isn't anything to scoff at either, with it being a unique cave to this area. Once you traverse through the cave, you'll run into another glitched object, but this is the first one that I'm aware of that you can go to the third glitch layer. You'll emerge in the sixth and final area of the game, a circus, which perfectly represents my mental state writing this part of the script. Here, you finally reach the home stretch of the game as you progress to the fun house until you find a block you can walk through and talk to Fredbear for the final time. Afterwards, you'll, stay with me, walk through a glitched object to progress. Be careful traversing this one, however, as you can fall beyond the third glitch layer, which is a big no-no. Once you emerge from the glitch realm for a final time, you'll have a short boss fight against Porkpatch, who's guarding a key. Picking up this key is the key to locks around the map and fighting a souped up version of the area boss in order to push a button. After all the buttons are pressed, you can go back to the circus and fight the security system. Normally the game would end here, but if you selected hard mode, you have one more fight ahead of you. Scott Cawthon himself. It's probably the hardest fight in the main game, only being beaten out by secret bosses. Once you beat him, the game is over. Well, remember when I said there's a hidden path in Fazbear Hills? Well, if we go back up there, you'll get teleported to the Halloween world. In here, there's a collection of minigames which include Chica's Magic Rainbow, Foxy Fighters, Foxy.exe, and FNaF 57 Freddy in Space. Chica's Magic Rainbow is your typical unfair platformer, Foxy Fighters is a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up, Foxy EXE is a creepypasta parody, and FNaF 57 is a Metroid-style game. Playing these games will unlock the overpowered Update 2 characters, which is made even funnier by the fact you can unlock them before progressing to the second area. However, you'll need these characters to tackle the Geist Layer. In this area, your health passively drains unless you use the skill Bubble Breath, which only these characters have. Once you reach the north part of the map, you'll fight the Purple Geist, but not for long, because the stupid Magic Rainbow just has to show up. This is by far the hardest boss in the game, made even harder by the 3-minute timer. If you fail to kill the Rainbow, she will use her Rainbow Cannon and kill you. If you beat her though, she'll scold you and disappear with a cutscene starting right after. This cutscene acts as a teaser for the next game, as you'll hear a very familiar voice. While this game is a very decisive one, it's definitely one of my personal favorites. The visuals are fairly goofy, and the combat system is pretty fun at times. It's also the first game to have a completely original soundtrack, which is a really nice touch. This game marks a pretty steadfast decline in interest in the series for me though, even though I made a, now deleted, video on this game years back that got over 1,000 views. So yeah, this game made me super duper famous, as you can clearly tell. The year would go by fairly quietly for the series, while Scott was continuing to develop the next mainline game. FNaF Search Location was released on October 7th, 2016, and it was the longest we had waited for a new game since the franchise started. Of course, there were teasers throughout the year, but we really didn't know much about this game until release. This is the first game in the series to stray away from the foundation set by the previous games, with the game being more futuristic and forgoing the core principles the original games were built on. Instead of being a game where you have to defend yourself against animatronics and having to manage your very limited resources, this game you act more as a maintenance worker. You have to go around the facility doing different tasks each night, giving the game a more varied feel, but can feel aimless at the same time considering nothing is consistent. I don't mind this, however, even if I do think the game could be a little more focused and less on rails. The game still manages to feel like a FNaF game while still being different enough to have its own identity, which I think is impressive and definitely not something that was easy to do. Getting into the actual gameplay of the game, the first is a fairly standard night. It's more meant to give the player time to adjust to how this game works and helps to give a good idea of what is expected of you night over night. You start by leaving the elevator through a vent after dealing with a dysfunctional tablet on your way down, ending up in the main room. Afterwards, you're introduced to the most consistent part of the nights, checking on the funtime animatronics and shocking them if they aren't on their stage. You'll typically start in this room and move on from here depending on what the disembodied voice tells you to do. For tonight, your task was just checking on all the animatronics and leaving. It's a bit of a shallow night, but for an introduction, I don't think it's too bad, though I wish you'd be able to explore more. Heading into the second night, it starts the same as the first, although this night shows some of the humor this game is infamous for. Your hand unit asks if you want to hear a different voice, and it auto-selects Angsty Teen, whose dialogue actually matches the voice pretty well. Once you get to the control panel, you see the animatronics are right next to your window, but once you shock them, the voice glitches out and forces you to carry on as usual. Heading to Baby's room, the shock button doesn't work, and the hand unit shuts the entire power system down, forcing you to hide under the desk in front of you. In this little cubby, you have to defend yourself against the Biddy Babs, and afterwards the hand unit informs you that the reset failed, and now you have to head to the breaker room to reset the power manually. In this room, you'll encounter Funtime Freddy and have to manage rebooting the power and watching your danger level, as if you're too careless, he'll jump scare you, make you crawl through Ballora Gallery all over again. Fun fact about the Ballora section, if you just tap the W key, Ballora shouldn't be able to jump scare you because of how she's implemented in this section. Once you're down in the breaker room, you can sprint across the gallery and make it out safely, ending the night. Thankfully, this night is a lot more in-depth, but definitely shows the flaws of this style of gameplay. I also forgot to mention in the previous night that each night ends with an episode of The Immortal and the Restless that you can just mash the spacebar to eat popcorn during, which is just peak gameplay in my opinion. Night 3 starts the same as usual, going down the elevator and to the control panel. This time, though, you get to listen to casual bongos in the elevator, my personal favorite bit of this game. You don't even get to check on Ballora or Funtime Foxy, as you're basically thrown straight into the Funtime Auditorium. Although before that, the game does let you go to Baby's room and back under the desk to hear her talk about something. She details her first and only time on stage, and talks about how she'd count the children coming in and out of her room. She then talks about how she can make ice cream, and how she accidentally killed a child, saying she didn't feel like herself when it happened. Then you get to see a version of this screen with the death minigame, where the secret ending of it has you bring an ice cream back to the start of the level, where you'll see said event play out. Back to the main game, you'll have to navigate the Funtime Auditorium by using your light to flash the room occasionally while not running into Funtime Foxy. I'm still not really sure how this section works, but once you're through, you'll find yourself in parts and service with Funtime Freddy right in front of you. Once you push all the buttons on Freddy's face, his mask will pop open, revealing another button that you have to press to open his chest. Once you click his power module, the bunny hand puppet will disappear from his hand, making you track it down to click the button under its bow tie. This section kicks my ass more often than not, because for some reason I can never bait the bunny hand puppet properly to save me. Once you click the button, you're free to leave. However, Funtime Foxy is scripted to catch you during this night, making this the only canonical jump scare in the series, which is pretty neat. Sadly, because the night ends in the building, it doesn't mean we get to end our popcorn tonight, which makes it the worst out of the entire game in my opinion. Night 4 is regarded as the most infamous night of this game, and I'm inclined to agree, as I totally beat it legit during my marathon. Aha ha. This night opens up to show you inside some kind of animatronic shell while Baby monologues about how she kidnapped you. She goes on about how the suit can barely hold a person and reveals that you're in the scooping room, a location that will become relevant very shortly. Her dialogue kinda drags on for a while, just like me, for real, but she eventually notes that there's somebody else in the building tonight. Your view then gets turned to see Ballora exposing the suit's front to a camera. Shortly after Ballora gets scooped in front of your eyes, Baby opens your faceplates so the cameras can spot you properly. This night is the first night that's been nerfed after launch, but oddly not the only time it'll happen in this game. The entire night is just you fending for your life by winding up the spring locks and shaking the ballerinas off your suit. You You can't shake too much though, because this winds the spring locks down. It's a very delicate balancing act that's pretty difficult even after the nerf. This is definitely my least favorite knight in the game because I'm just flat out bad at this knight. The Bonnie hand puppet section is something I'm not great at, sure, but this knight feels like the final boss. Thankfully though, this knight redeems itself by having it end with the Immortal and the Restless, meaning more popcorn spam, baby! Night 5 starts as usual this time, with the elevator ride having the ever-iconic exotic Butters line. Once you enter the control module and check the lights, you'll see the technicians hanging over the stages where Ballora and Foxy resided. Next, you'll head off to parts and service, but unlike before, there's nobody in here, so you can just book it to the end. Afterwards, you'll see Baby in front of you, similar to how Freddy was earlier. After some yapping, you'll have to input a code on a keypad that'll pop out of her head, and afterwards, you'll send her to the scooping room. You'll leave parts of service and be sent back to the Funtime Auditorium, where Baby will guide you through the room, as you're not actually allowed to use your flashlight or else you'll get jump scared. It's actually a secret ending here, but let's put a pin in it for now and continue on with the night as intended. After following her instructions, you'll eventually be led to the scooping room, where you'll see all the shells of the Funtime animatronics and a mysterious new animatronic named Ennard staring at you from behind the window. Very shortly after, you'll get your inside scooped, and it'll cut to a shot of you looking in the mirror with a blacked out silhouette with what looks like animatronic opening eyes as the game cuts to credits. Normally, the game would be over, but remember that pin I made like 30 seconds ago? Well, going back to it reveals an alternate ending. How you access this ending is by bringing the ice cream back to the child in the death minigame, granting you access to the private room on this night. During Baby's guidance to the Funtime Auditorium, go forward and right to enter the private room. You'll know you did it right when you hear the voice say access granted, otherwise it'll say access denied and you'll be attacked by Ennard. Once you enter the room, you'll be greeted by an office with the hand unit saying it's a dangerous area, and once the maintenance crew arrives at 6 AM, you'll be rescued and fired. After the dialogue ends, the Ennard boss fight will begin. I'm not fully sure how this night works myself, but I do know that power is very strict during this night. Throughout the night, Baby's voice will be talking to you, asking why you didn't trust them, and wondering why people are the way they are. There's also a neat Easter egg where if you hit 1983 on the keypad, the screens will light up with views of the FNaF 4 house. If you paid attention during the breaker room segment, you'll see it has additional maps on it too, resembling the FNaF 4 house, Fun with Plush Trap section, and another area that I'm not quite familiar with. Once you beat the night, it ends as usual, although when you get home, you'll now see your exotic Butters on your TV. Yippee. At some point, Ennard will crawl across the screen, implying he still takes your body no matter what ending you get. This is the third game in the series to get a significant post-launch update, with this one getting a custom night added. Although it's less of a custom night and more of an assortment of challenges, seeing as you can't customize when animatronics are active. There's 10 challenges to pick from, and those challenges are Angry Ballet featuring Ballora in both mini-arenas, Freddy & Co. featuring Funtime Freddy, Yendo, Funtime Foxy, and Bonnet. Funtime Frenzy featuring Funtime Freddy, Yendo, Funtime Foxy, and Lolbit. Dolls Attack featuring Bonnet, Bidybab, Electrobab in both mini-arenas. Girls Night featuring Ballora, Funtime Foxy, Bonnet, Bidybab in both mini-arenas. Weirdos featuring Yendo, Bonnet, Electrobab, Lolbit, and Mini-Arena 1. Top Shelf featuring Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Yendo, Funtime Foxy, and Bonnet. Bottom Shelf featuring Bidybab, Electrobab, Lolbit in both mini-arenas. Cupcake Challenge, which has everybody except for Yendo, Bidybab, and Mini-Arena 2. Finally, Golden Freddy Mode features every animatronic. Going over the animatronics, they all function as follows. Bidybab will always be in the vent ahead of the player. When she gets too close, close the vent door until she retreats. Funtime Freddy will hide in either the west or east closet, then send Bonbon to attack from the same side. When he commands Bonbon to attack, shut the door. If he announces a surprise, shut the opposite door. Funtime Foxy will emerge from his curtain, then charge to the office, check on him frequently to slow his progress. Ballora will approach from either the west or east hall. Listen to her music to become louder, then shut the appropriate door. Electrobab drains the player's power if there is a danger sign next to the power. The player must administer a controlled shock to deactivate Electrobab. Lolbit will appear on the monitors in the office, followed by visual and auditory distractions. The player must type LOL on the keypad in the office or on their keyboard to deactivate Lolbit. Bonnet may run through the player's room at random after the player closes the monitor. Click on her nose to deactivate her before she leaves the screen. This mysterious endoskeleton will appear at random after the player closes the monitor. If he's in the office, quickly open the monitor again to make him disappear. Mini-arenas will appear at random and begin draining the player's oxygen supply, eventually causing a blackout. Administer a controlled shock to deactivate them. These mini-arenas will appear at random and block the player's view in the office. They can't be prevented or deactivated. Each challenge has 4 difficulties: easy, normal, hard, and very hard, each with fluctuating AI levels. Beating these challenges on very hard mode will unlock a series of cutscenes where we see Michael Afton walking down the street and watching him progressively become purple, until the last cutscene where he vomits out energy into the sewers while hearing Baby's voice ring that he won't die, before getting back up. Beating Golden Freddy mode on very hard unlocks its own cutscene, where Michael monologues about how he's going to find his father and ends with a shot of Springtrap in the ruins of Fazbear Fright, the location for the third game. Initially, when this update came out, Golden Freddy mode was locked as Scott wanted to fix any potential bugs before he released the mode, with it being unlocked a few days later. It was discovered that Golden Freddy mode on release was extremely difficult, so a patch came out a couple days later that added more power and the aforementioned cutscene. This is also the first game that can be controlled with a keyboard, a very nice quality of life feature that will also be present in future games. I think this iteration of the custom night is my favorite because it's mostly, if not entirely, up to your skill at the game instead of random events. Finally, getting onto the visuals of the game, I know a lot of people don't like them, but I'm personally a fan of them, with it being a contender for my favorite in the series. This game goes for a more futuristic art style than the previous games, with the animatronic faceplates being able to open up and the place looking more high-tech than the previous locations. I also think the private room is one of the best looking rooms of the game because it really makes the place feel like a secret underground bunker. Something that's easy to forget is that you're in an underground facility due to the only reminder being your descent at the beginning of the night. There's also this fact that the game's environment are fully animated unlike before, which really helps to immerse you. This game marks the last time I played a FNaF game until 2022. I don't remember why, but I checked out of this franchise after this game. I think around this time I got my own console, so I had a lot more options to play games, which would explain a lot given this franchise wasn't on consoles until the past couple years. But man, what a game to end on, yeah? This location is a very mixed game for a lot of people, despite it being a game I enjoy a lot. It's even funnier when you realize my reintroduction was Security Breach, but that's a topic for later. For now though, who's up for some tycoon gaming? Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator released on December 4th, 2017, and it's just a normal tycoon game. You start the game by creating a pizza and feeding children until your shadow clone shows up, but no biggie, you just throw pizzas at it to stun it and, sorry, what? I don't think that's normal. This game is a massive bait and switch by Scott. The game itself is fairly unremarkable at first. The Steam page only shows the beginning part of the game. The description is pretty normal, albeit short, and nothing about the game seems off until your shadow clone starts glitching out. That's when the real nature of this game is revealed, as you're suddenly facing Scrap Baby and conducting an auditory experiment on her. Afterwards, the proper opening cutscene plays out where it's revealed you're a franchisee for Fazbear Entertainment. You're then thrown into the simulator part of the game where you can start buying items to place around your pizzeria. This part of the game is fairly standard, purchasing items to raise your pizzeria stats and making sure you don't get sued. You can also choose to accept advertisements for some extra money, but I'd be careful with these. You also need to upgrade your floor plan to be able to add more items, which brings more customers, which brings in more money. It's also home to the best character in the franchise, the Fruit Punch Clown. This loop is pretty simple, but that's only half of the game. The second half is more akin to a traditional FNaF game, with the major difference that your win condition is completing all your tasks and logging out of the computer. This part is similar to the sound-based gameplay of FNaF 4, now featuring PNG jump scares. This game gives you a few tools to defend yourself. Audio lures that you can use to lure animatronics to a certain vent, motion detector that will detect the animatronics, and silent ventilation which reduces your noise level, making it harder for you to be detected. You can also upgrade your equipment with the money you earn from the Tycoon mode, allowing tasks to complete faster. The way animatronics work are interesting, because if you want to, you can just avoid them entirely. They can only enter your pizzeria if you A, choose to salvage them after the office segments, B, if you buy items that have high risk stats, or C, be lefty and be purchasable for 5 whole dollars. The advertisements also come into play during this night, with them interrupting your tasks and playing a loud sound, making you more likely to die. The safest way to play is to set an audio lure on one side, start a task, and stare down the opposite side's vent until your task is complete. Then you start another one, and repeat until completion. It's an interesting idea for sure, but it feels kinda lame compared to what came before. I'm not sure why it's a series of vents instead of rooms, but I guess it's separated from the main building. I think the atmosphere here is the weakest in the franchise. It just doesn't invoke anything in me. Sure, the pizzeria looks pretty nice, but the office sections look super bland to me. It also doesn't help that you basically get to see nothing outside of your office. Audio design is also just kind of whatever. There's nothing really special about it, but it's effective. I do like that the animatronics have voices though. It can kind of feel haunting to hear them when you don't expect them to be there. I know we don't talk about story in this series because everybody knows how much of a mess it is. Convoluted as hell, constantly it's getting retconned. However, Pizza Sim is a special game. It's the end to the original story, and it ends with probably the most iconic cutscene in the entire franchise. It's a very satisfying conclusion to everything, despite how rocky the road to this point was. I wasn't really around for this game, but even I knew if connection terminated at the time, it was that popular. I'll just let the cutscene speak for itself here.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to receive a gift, nor have you been called here by the individual you assume, although you have indeed been called. You have all been called here, into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection, and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach. But you will never find them. None of you will. This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. I am remaining as well. I am nearby. This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still, and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, friend. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms, the way you lifted others into yours. And then, what became of you? I should have known you wouldn't be content to disappear. Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It's time to rest, for you, and for those you have carried in your arms. This ends, for all of us, in communication.
My friend, you have met
a 61% human video.
But, you know, I don't feel too bad about it. After all, if it weren't from me, it would have just been from
Any other FNaF video out there
you know? I guess what I'm trying to say is
that you should like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.
We're not quite done yet though. What started as a custom night for Pizza Sim turned full-blown game. Ultimate Custom Night released on June 27th, 2018 and was the biggest FNaF game up to this point, with a whopping 50 animatronics to customize and an insane amount of on-screen effects. This is the game I probably have the least experience with, as there's not much outside of the challenges to do except mess around in your own will. Like before, let's go over all of the challenges. After I take a sip of water. Bears Attack 1 features Freddy Fazbear, Golden Freddy, Phantom Freddy, Nightmare Fredbear, Nightmare, Helpy, Nedbear, Rockstar Freddy, Molten Freddy, and Lefty. Bears Attack 2 and 3 features higher AI levels for the aforementioned animatronics while adding Toy Freddy and Nightmare Freddy. Pay Attention 1 features Balloon Boy, JJ, The Puppet, Nightmare Balloon Boy, Old Man Consequences, Funtime Foxy, Helpy, Music Man, L-Chip, Funtime Chica, William Afton, and Phone Guy, with the second inversion just increasing the AI levels. Ladies Night 1 features Chica, Toy Chica, Mangle, JJ, Withered Chica, Jacko Chica, Circus Baby, Ballora, Happy Frog, Rockstar Chica, Funtime Chica, and Scrap Baby. Ladies Night 2 features higher AI levels for the aforementioned animatronics while adding Nightmare Mangle. Ladies Night 3 features higher AI levels for the aforementioned animatronics while adding Funtime Foxy. Creepy Crawlies 1 features Mangle, Withered Chica, Withered Bunny, The Puppet, Springtrap, Phantom Mangle, Ennard, Happy Frog, Mr. Hippo, Pig Patch, Ned Bear, Orbo Elephant, Music Man, and Molten Freddy. Creepy Crawlies 2 features higher AI levels for the aforementioned animatronics while adding William Afton. Nightmare's Attack features Withered Bonnie, Golden Freddy, Nightmare Bonnie, Nightmare Fredbear, Nightmare, Jacko Chica, Nightmare Mangle, Nightmarion, Nightmare Balloon Boy, Music Man, Molten Freddy, Scrap Baby, and Lefty. Springtrap features JJ, Springtrap, Phantom Mangle, Phantom Freddy, Phantom Balloon Boy, Nightmarion, Trash in the Gang, Rockstar Foxy, William Afton, and Lefty. Old Friends features Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, Mangle, Balloon Boy, The Puppet, Springtrap, Circus Baby, and Phone Guy. Chaos 1 features Toy Freddy, Withered Bonnie, The Puppet, Phantom Mangle, Nightmare Freddy, Nightmare Fredbear, Nightmare, Jacko Chico, Old Man Consequences, Ballora, Trash in the Gang, Helpy, Happy Frog, Mr. Hippo, Pig Patch, Rockstar Freddy, Rockstar Bonnie, Rockstar Foxy, Music Man, L-Chip, Funtime Chica, and William Afton. Chaos 2 features Freddy Fazbear, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, The Puppet, Golden Freddy, Phantom Balloon Boy, Nightmare Bonnie, Nightmare Mangle, Old Man Consequences, Circus Baby, Trash in the Gang, Helpy, Happy Frog, Mr. Hippo, Pig Patch, Rockstar Freddy, Rockstar Chica, Rockstar Foxy, Music Man, L-Chip, Funtime Chica, Scrap Baby, William Afton, and Phone Guy. Chaos 3 features Bonnie, Foxy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, Mangle, Balloon Boy, JJ, Withered Chica, Withered Bonnie, Phantom Mangle, Phantom Balloon Boy, Nightmare Bonnie, Nightmarion, Nightmare Balloon Boy, Old Man Consequences, Ennard, Trash in the Gang, Helpy, Happy Frog, Mr. Hippo, Pig Patch, Ned Bear, Orbo Elephant, Rockstar Freddy, Rockstar Bonnie, Rockstar Chica, Rockstar Foxy, Music Man, L-Chip, Funtime, Chica, Lefty, and Phone Guy. As you can tell, there's a lot of stuff to go through here, given that there's 50 characters, all with unique mechanics. And because I'm insane, here's what all of them do, taken straight from the in-game descriptions. Freddy Fazbear approaches from the left hull. Keep track of him on the monitor and shut the door when he is standing in the doorway. He moves faster as the building gets warmer. Bonnie now shares Pirate Cove with Foxy, but whereas Foxy will hide himself when viewed on camera, he will do the opposite and become more agitated. View the figurine on the desk to see who is active in Pirate's Cove. While Chica doesn't care if the music box is wound up, she can grow tired of the selection playing. When the sound of pots and pans stop, you only have a short amount of time to change the music. The global music box can also soothe her. Foxy will gradually leave Pirate's Cove if you don't check on him regularly. Once he is out, he will enter your office piece by piece. Toy Freddy sits in the parts and service room playing Five Nights with Mr. Hugs on his big screen TV. Fix the cams on Toy Freddy's monitor, then be sure that the appropriate door is closed to prevent Mr. Hugs from jump scaring him. Put on your Freddy Fazbear mask quickly when Toy Bonnie sneaks into your room to fool him and make him go away. Put on your Freddy Fazbear mask quickly when Toy Chica sneaks into your room to fool her and make her go away. Unlike the other animatronics in the vents, once Mangle reaches the opening, he will never leave. Use the vent snare to prevent her from making it that far. Balloon Boy will try to sneak in through the side vent. Close the side vent and wait until you hear a thud indicating he is gone. If he slips in, he will temporarily disable your flashlight. JJ will try to sneak in through the side vent. Close the side vent and wait until you hear a thud indicating she is gone. If she slips in, she will disable door controls temporarily. Withered Chica climbs through the air vent, but may get stuck when trying to enter your office. Use the vent snare to prevent her from reaching the opening. Withered Bonnie will appear in your office, poised to attack. Throw on your Freddy mask to make him leave again. Keep the puppet's music box wound or he will come to get you. Global Music Box also works against him. Golden Freddy will occasionally appear in your office. Throw on your Freddy mask or pull up your monitor quickly to make him disappear. Springtrap makes his way towards the vent opening embedded in the wall in front of you. When he is poised to attack, you will see his face looking down at you. Close the vent door to send him away. When you see Phantom Mangle on your monitor, quickly close it or he will appear in your office and create an audio disturbance. Shine your flashlight on Phantom Freddy to cause him to fade away. If you don't, he will jump scaring you, giving time for enemies in the vents to sneak into your office. Heat causes him to appear faster. When Phantom Balloon Boy appears on your monitor, quickly close it or change the cam to avoid a jump scare. When the Freddles begin to accumulate in your office, shine your flashlight on them before Freddy appears. Buy the Nightmare Bonnie plush from the prize counter when he appears in the hallway to avoid a jump scare. He cannot be stopped by the office door. Nightmare Fredbear is invisible to the cameras and can be only seen when he reaches your left doorway. Close the door on his face to send him back into the darkness. Nightmare is invisible to the cameras and can only be seen when he reaches your right doorway. Close the door on his face to send him back into the darkness. When the office heats up, Jacko Chica will appear in both halls at the same time. Close both doors to make her vanish. This won't work if the office is 100 degrees or more. Purchase Nightmare Mangle's plush toy from the prize counter when he appears in the right hall to avoid his attack. He can't be stopped by the office door. Don't let your mouse cursor lingo over Nightmare on for too long. When Nightmare Balloon Boy is slumped over in your office, do not shine your light on him. When he is sitting up, however, you must use your flashlight to reset him. Use the seat button to catch a fish when his minigame appears, otherwise he will lock your monitor for a short time. Purchase Circus Baby's plush toy from the prize counter when she appears in the right hall to avoid her attack. The office door can't stop her. Ballora will approach from one of the hallways, listen for which hall she is in, and shut the appropriate door. Check Funtime Foxy's curtain to see when his show is set to begin, then be sure to watch his cam at the exact time to postpone the show, otherwise that is when your game will end. Difficult to see on the vent radar, Ennard will make his way towards your office, listen for the sound cue of squeaking metal, then close the vent. When you see Helby sitting in your office, click on him quickly, otherwise he will get in your face with an air horn, agitating sound-sensitive animatronics. Happy Frog moves throughout the duct vents, making her way towards you. Use the audio lure to keep her in place. She's immune to the heater. Mr. Hippo makes his way toward your office using the air ducts. Use the audio lure to hold him in place, or the heater to push him back. Pickpatch makes his way towards your office using the air ducts. Use the audio lure to hold him in place, or the heater to push him back. Nedbear climbs through the vent system, making his way towards you. Use the audio lure or the heater to keep him at bay. Orville Elephant makes his way towards your office through the air duct. He isn't often fooled by the audio lure, but can be pushed back with the heater. Rockstar Freddy will occasionally activate and ask for 5 Faz coins. You can alternatively use the heater to cause him to malfunction. When Rockstar Bonnie appears in your office, search the cameras to find his guitar. Click the guitar to send him away. Check the left and right hallways and double-click the wet floor sign to place it on the same side as Rockstar Chica. She won't enter if the sign is in place. When you see Rockstar Foxy's parrot, click it, and he may offer you some help. This comes with risk, however. Keep the noise down or you'll begin to hear Music Man's cymbals crashing faster and faster, eventually leading to a jump scare. El Chip is just here to promote his new restaurant. Close the ad when it appears. Funtime Chica will appear at random to distract you. There's no way to avoid her. Molted Freddy climbs in the vents but can avoid the vent snare. Listen for his voice, then shut the vent door before he gets through. Scrap Baby will appear on the opposite side of your office desk. When she moves, use a controlled shock. William Afton will attack once per night, making a lot of noise and causing the lights to flicker before attacking. Close the right vent door to block him. Lefty becomes active from noise and heat. He's too far away from the music box to be soothed by it, but the global music box can calm him down. When Phone Guy calls, quickly mute him, otherwise it will create a lengthy audio disturbance. The mute button will appear in different places each time. Sorry, did I say there were only 50? Well, I lied. There's an additional 6 secret characters that are most commonly summoned during 50/20 mode. Those being, RWQ will cause your office to become pitch black for about 10 seconds. There's no way to avoid him. Plush Trap will appear on a specific screen and sit in his chair. If the player doesn't scare him out of his chair fast enough, he will jump scare them. Nightmare Chica's jaws will begin to close on the player's screen. If the player does not promptly turn on the power AC before the jaws close, she will jump scare the player. The further down the jaws are, the longer they take to disappear. Like in the previous game, Bonnet will walk across the office and must be stopped by clicking on her nose. When summoned, several mini-arenas will appear and block the player's view. Unlike in the previous game, this effect is temporary and the mini-arenas will leave after a short time, usually about an in-game hour. When summoned, Wallbait's face will appear on the screen with the words, "Please stand by," blocking the player's view, preventing them from using the cameras or the doors, and adding about 3 bars to the noise meter. The player must type LOL on their keyboard to make it disappear. Okay, now that those are out of the way, let's talk about some of the actual mechanics of the game. The game borrows a lot of mechanics from almost every single game so far, while including its own. We have the cameras in Freddy Mask, with the cameras mostly just being used to stall certain animatronics a la FNaF 1. You have 2 doors on either side and 2 vents, one in front of you and one on your right side. Entering the camera view, you'll see you have 3 different systems: the camera, the vent, and the air ducts. The vent system you can basically ignore as long as you shut the front vent before flipping your camera, and the duct system you just have to place a lure on whatever side you like while closing the opposite side. While you're in the camera system, you can collect Faz coins that you can use at the price counter to buy certain items, the most important being the death coin that allows you to eliminate 1 animatronic for the rest of the night. Finally, if you look on the right part of the screen, you'll notice a bunch of different options that you can select. These are the power generator, silent ventilation, heater, power AC, and global music box. These can also be activated with numbers on your keyboard. These are something you want to be using throughout the night since they are vital for survival. You'll also need to reset the ventilation by clicking the button in the bottom right every so often, giving you a reason to flip the cameras. Throughout your night, an animatronic called DD or XOR on 50/20 will occasionally pop up and either summon an animatronic or raise the AI level of one already enabled, but you can block DD, not XOR, with a power-up you can select from the main menu. This is the second game that uses keyboard controls, with the first being System Location's custom night. There's a lot of binds because of how many mechanics there are, but it's way better than having to do everything manually because it would not only be a nightmare, but also literally impossible. And that about does it for the Click Team era of the franchise. After this game, Steel Wool Studios would become the developers for the series, releasing their first game, Help Wanted, in the following year. I won't be talking about it here since I don't have a VR headset as of writing, so with that being said, who wants to talk about everybody's favorite game in the series? Security Breach was released on December 16th, 2021 and is the most negatively received game in the entire series. It suffered a series of delays, as well as having a nightmarish development cycle behind the scenes, and the game suffering to major scope creep to Scott not even telling Steel Wool the story he had planned out. The game was a disaster. However, despite its negative reputation, I don't really hate this game. I agree, it's really not that great of a game, but there's something special about it. It's been a while since I've played a game that just doesn't work as intended at all. However, I'm not a fan of the game in its current condition because it feels like the devs slapped band-aids over gunshot wounds. This game is fundamentally flawed and needs more than just invisible walls to fix it up. I understand why Steel Wool did what they did because it's a lot easier to patch up a game that exists instead of remaking it entirely. This game really needed more than what it was given. It's perfectly playable now and you can have fun with the game, but a lot of my fun has been removed because of the patches. But why do I believe this game to be fundamentally flawed? Ignoring the bugs for a moment, Security Breach tries to use the core principles of the series, camera system, resource management, and time, and fails in every single way possible. Cameras may as well not even exist in this game because I've rarely seen them used by people who aren't sleep deprived out of their minds. I don't think cameras work as well in a game where you can physically move around, especially with how limited the camera system is in this game. It made sense in the previous games because you were bound to one location, but here you can look at the area the camera covers or even go there yourself. Not to mention how little they're emphasized throughout the game, only being mentioned once in the very beginning and never again. Resource management is another system that may as well not exist given how many opportunities you have to recharge your flashlight. It really feels like it's more rare to not have a recharge station nearby than to run out of flashlight battery. It just doesn't make sense. I'd get it if the recharge stations were few and far between, or maybe your battery drained faster as a result of having so many, but battery drains so slowly it feels backwards. The fast camera is on a passive cooldown, which is fine by itself, but you're going to end up using it so infrequently that you're always going to have it ready to go whenever you need it. Funnily enough, I think if you gave the fast cam a manual recharge, it'd be a better implementation because you'd have to actually manage when you use it. Granted, in the current state of the game, it wouldn't matter as much, but it'd be a better design for the item. Phaser Blaster is basically just a better version of the fast cam in basically every way, except for the fact that you can't cancel jump scare with it like you can with the camera. You get multiple shots to stun animatronics with, you have a good amount of reach with it, and it's also on a passive timer. It suffers the same problem that the camera does, where the infrequent use means you should always have it active, but if this game had more animatronic encounters, it might not be so bad. Finally, the time mechanic also may as well not exist because it really only exists for Moon's hourly appearances. I guess Steel Wool tried to use the hour system as a chapter system, but it just kind of feels half-heartedly put together. A lot of the time, I forget what time it even is, since when you're on one quest, you're typically locked in doing that specific quest. I'm not really sure how this could work in the game's current state, as it fits more for what the older games were and not really a full-run game. That's not all either, as I believe the core foundation of the game is shaky at best, even taking away the FNaF elements from it. It's a horror game with an insanely big and bright environment, leaving no room for enemies to sneak up or surprise you. You can see the animatronics from a mile away and have so many tools to completely negate their presence. Not to mention all the animatronics feel the same, with the only real difference being which of your tools they completely ignore. Monty is the only real threat, as you can't use the camera or blaster to negate him until you shatter him later on, and he can leap forward to close the distance pretty fast. Roxy is basically just a worse version of Monty until you shatter her, in which she becomes very similar to him in the sense you can't use your blaster or camera on her, but by the time you shatter the animatronics, they show up less, so I don't believe it makes that big of a difference. Chica literally exists, and that's about as much as I can say about her. All of her versions can be trivialized by the tools at your disposal and are not hard to get away from. Freddy is actually not an enemy in this game, being your ally that you can upgrade by shattering the other animatronics, stealing parts from them and implanting them into Freddy. In fact, that's the whole point of the game, since you need their upgrades to further explore the Pizzaplex. I think it's an interesting concept, but like everything else in this game, Freddy is an incredibly powerful tool that has basically no consequences for using. You can call him almost anywhere and hide inside his chest to negate any threats, even Monty. He has a power system similar to a flashlight, but like the flashlight, there's so many recharge stations it feels meaningless, especially since you can upgrade his battery later on. Now granted, there are a lot less recharge stations for Freddy, so it at least feels like the devs trying to make you balance his power, but in execution it still kinda doesn't matter as much as it feels they wanted it to. And of course, there's one more threat I haven't mentioned yet, staff bots. These little shits are everywhere in this game. You cannot turn a corner without seeing at least 3 of them at any given time. It makes sense to have some secondary threats as the main animatronics aren't around as often as they probably should be, but this is just absurd. Sometimes I forget the main 3 even exist because of how many staff bots are around this place. Not to mention their spot radius feels a bit too overtuned and is used as the primary way to make the game harder. I get that they can't just have all 3 animatronics on you at the same time, but this also wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for how open the Pizzaplex is. It also doesn't help that basically every staff bot is the exact same model with a few unique ones that aren't even threats to you anyway. Maybe if each area had staff bots themed to that location and the spam was toned down, it wouldn't feel as bad, but as it is now, it feels horrible to traverse certain locations. I want to touch on the story for a bit, even though I haven't talked about it for any of the other games, excluding Pizza Sim. This game's story is nonsensical and stitched together. We actually know why the story of this game is so convoluted and disjointed. To give a short version of it, Scott basically told Steel to implement certain aspects of the story into the game without actually telling them what the story is. Because of Scott's very poor communication with them, Steel thought it was their job to connect the pieces themselves, which is what they've started doing and why we ended up with this mess. This game you play as a child named Gregory, who is for some reason trapped in the Pizzaplex after hours. Throughout the game, you go through and dismantle the other animatronics and progress your exploration through the Pizzaplex to uncover what's really going on. At 6 AM, you have the choice to leave the Pizzaplex or stay and go for another ending, and that's where it gets messy. It's never explained why Gregory's here, or what exactly he wants to uncover. What connection does he have to this place? Why does Freddy just default to helping him out with everything? There's so many unanswered questions just from the little I'm willing to talk about, because if I think about this game's story anymore, I'm going to explode. Okay, I think I've gotten most of the negative stuff off of my chest. I promise I still like this game despite how much I just ripped into it. There are redeeming qualities, but I felt it right to talk about the negative first. I think the actual level designs are really well made and feel pretty cohesive, being a giant pizzaplex with multiple locations. I just think the location is a really neat idea overall. It has massive amounts of potential, and I hope to see something similar to it, but more fleshed out in the future. The visual design, while not very scary to me, is pretty solid. Sure, it's undesirable for a horror game, but hey, if it wasn't a horror game, it'd be pretty good. I want to talk about my enjoyment of the game because it's super weird. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a fan of the game in its current state. Instead of the version I love are the older versions where the game isn't as functional as it currently is. Old Security Breach felt like a sandbox game, figuring out how you could break and bend the game to your will, and that's where most of my enjoyment came from. This was the first game I had played since Sister Location's release all the way back in 2016, and I came into it during its broken phase. To make a completely unrelated example, I love Old Security Breach for the same reasons I love Sonic 2006. They're both completely broken games where the fun to me is finding ways to use the bugs and poorly implemented game mechanics to exploit the game heavily to make it do wacky things. The only difference being this game is a lot worse than 06 was, but that's my mandatory 06 mention out of the way. I loved the way you could skip over segments and confuse the game, causing very unintended results. The way these skips and exploits were patched just made the game less fun for me personally, with the invisible wall spam and half-baked fixes. Security Breach is a very complicated game for me. It's hard for me to fully quantify my exact enjoyment of the game. I didn't intend for this section to be so negatively charged, but it's also expected given how the game panned out. It feels almost wrong for me to mostly talk negatively about one of my favorite games in the series, but as mentioned, it's hard for me to fully put into words about what this game does to encapsulate me so much. It's such a fascinating game to me that I can't really bring myself to hate it despite the problems I have with it. There is something Steve Wold did to redeem the game in some capacity though, and it lies within a ruined pizzaplex. Ruin was a free DLC for Security Breach that was released on July 25th, 2023 and was an attempt to make things right with the community. It's an attempt to redeem Security Breach, and it does a pretty good job of that. Ruin is a lot smaller of a game than Security Breach, and I think that's for the best. Security Breach is such an overscoped game, it's a miracle it even exists in the first place. For Ruin, it at least feels like they learned to keep the project smaller and more focused. It's also a lot less buggy too, maybe they were actually given time to polish the game instead of infinitely expanding it. Because of this, it's a more consistent and engaging experience compared to the main game, which is such a low bar, but they managed to exceed that bar. They didn't force in any mechanics that didn't fit with the new gameplay style, biggest example being the time system's absence and having an actual chapter system for progression. Also a completely linear game, similar to Sister Location, but feels a lot more focused than that game was. I think Ruin deviates from the core design of the FNaF games a lot more successfully, although it has its own issues. It still uses the same visual design language as Security Breach, which while I still like, it just feels like it bogs any potential horror elements down. It's hard to feel scared when this is the same style used in the comically broken game that precedes this. The gameplay isn't very interesting either, with it mostly being a walking simulator with the occasional puzzle. This style of gameplay isn't bad per se, but I don't feel it's utilized properly. It relies too much on the environment for the horror instead of the actual gameplay, which doesn't work very well when your visuals aren't that scary to begin with. The main threats are somehow easier to avoid than the base game, a feat I didn't even think possible. If you hear the very obvious sound cue, all you have to do is just take the mask off and all your problems disappear. It's actually more of an annoyance than anything, feeling like you're arbitrarily timed on how long you can actually play the game. It's not something you can avoid or get better at, you're at the mercy of the game on how long you can play the game. It's not like you can do anything outside of the VR world either, you're expected to sit around while the threat passively goes away. The dual world system is actually surprisingly well implemented and a solid idea from the start. I just wish the gameplay complemented it more. Again, you're on rails for almost all of the game, and there's no real reason to explore either worlds properly on your own, not that you even could really. Feels like the biggest missed opportunity of the game. In terms of bugs, there's not really much to talk about, but I do want to highlight the ones I did run into. The first one is the game incorrectly teleporting you when you take the mask on and off. Sometimes the game can get confused on your location, so it believes you're in one space when you're in another, so when you go to switch, it'll teleport you either way above the map or way below it. Another problem that's only specific to one area is the game being confused on the animatronics locations, defaulting them to their origin point. In the section with the mini music med, this issue is most prevalent. It's the only time I really died in all my playthroughs because of how easy the game is, with these deaths being caused by something out of my control. It also highlights my issue with the camera audio system introduced, likely inspired by FNaF 3 systems. Sometimes it feels like the animatronics just don't work properly when you use the audio lures. It's fine if they sometimes don't move immediately, but I've seen them just interrupt their own pathing for no apparent reason. It feels inconsistent and unpredictable. The premise for this game is a lot better this time around. You play as Cassidy, Gregory's friend, who went back to the Pizzaplex after Gregory asked her to head there and find him. Throughout the game, Gregory leads Cassidy through the now very broken Pizzaplex and disabling security systems to get to the bottom of the sinkhole. It's eventually revealed that Gregory has been the mimic all along, leading the player to set it loose from the Pizzaplex. It's serviceable, but if you don't know anything about the books, like me, you're probably wondering what the hell the mimic is. I didn't know what it was either until I looked into it a bit more, and yeah, it's what it sounds like. An endoskeleton created to mimic others, with it even gaining a disguise in the secret scooper ending. It's currently unclear which ending is canonical, but I'm sure we'll figure it out in the next mainline game. Hell, I'm not even sure what Security Breach ending this game follows. Ruin is a weird game for me, and I never realized that until I actually started writing this section. I like it and think it's a good game, but there's also just a lot that feels like Steelwool might have learned the wrong lesson from Security Breach's failures. Maybe it was just meant to be an experimental title while they iron out something for their next game, Secret of the Mimic. I want to feel hopeful for the future of the franchise, and Ruin does give me some of that hope, but only time will really tell if Steelwool can carry the torch on their own. Overall, I think this franchise still holds up in the current year, despite whatever problems they have. I would have liked to dedicate a section to Into the Pit, but I haven't beaten it yet, and I feel like it doesn't fit with the rest of this video given how new of a game it is. Maybe I'll get around to it one day, but I'm not sure how much interest I have in it at the moment. I'd also like to talk about the VR games at some point in the future once I get my hands on a VR headset, as I've always been interested in them. But for now, I'd like to thank you all for watching, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.